Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you can hear me okay. Welcome to our 2019-2020 Impact Report launch. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Brad Park, and I'm the President and CEO at United Way Halton and Hamilton. It is an absolute pleasure to be here with you today with some of our strongest community leaders. Today is a celebration that reinforces the power of our community. Now, first, I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we do our work is situated upon traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wyandot, the Mississaugas of New Credit First Nation, and the Haudenosaunee Six Nations. The territory is mutually covered by the Dish with One Spoon, Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Ojibwe and other allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, this is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community on their territory. Today is really about celebration, and it's dedicated to everyone who has made this past year a success. Thank you to all the frontline agencies, community partners, government, labor, and businesses who've made a powerful impact in our community. And a special thanks to our gracious and engaged donors and supporters. With your hard work, compassion, and commitment to United Way, you are building a stronger community where fewer people are left behind. Now, over the last year, United Way has worked with community to address some of our most crucial problems. Problems such as domestic violence, mental illness, unemployment, homelessness, education inequality, social isolation, poverty, and hunger. Because of you, together, we can address these issues. Next to the government, United Ways across Canada are the largest funders of social services in the country. In Halton and Hamilton specifically, your investments provide vital funding to 64 agencies offering 128 programs. These programs hit all corners of our communities and offer a much needed lifeline. These programs are the critical components of the social safety net that is necessary in order for our community to be a place where no one gets left behind. Regardless of how many times I see these figures, I am moved. I'm moved because the number of people we support is staggering and is very telling of our reality. And the only way we can help these friends and neighbors is because of you, our partners, our donors, our supporters. Last year, you helped more than 200,000 people facing unimaginable barriers. And of those, more than 25,000 were seniors. We know that seniors are the fastest growing demographic in society, and they're among some of the most vulnerable, confronting isolation, loneliness, and often require specialized vital supports. We've also helped more than 23,000 children and youth who are essentially our future. We know that investing in youth is one of the best strategies to break the cycle of intergenerational poverty. We also know that investing in kids increases high school graduation rates, improves a sense of belonging, reduces crime rates, and drives our economic future. United Way makes measurable improvement on priority social issues in our community. By working with community partners to understand root causes, develop strategies to address them, bring together the right resources to get the job done, and measure our results, we create lasting change in our communities. All the investments that we make are based on 3 areas of focus and are founded on data, research, and evidence to ensure that we have the greatest impact. Our 3 areas of focus include all that kids can be, poverty to possibility, healthy people, strong communities. So let's first look at our first focus area, all that kids can be. There are many different statistics that show that school children are missing out on breakfast, which is putting them at a disadvantage of learning. We know that too many youth in our community are not attending high school, And we know the rate of suicidal thoughts have not seen any decrease in recent years. Today, 1 in 4 children are not ready before starting grade 1. And we know not being ready for school before grade 1 is directly connected to lower high school graduation rates, making early childhood learning essential. With more than 34% of youth reporting psychological distress, we know that investing in counseling and support services can change the course of their life as an adult. And with 1 in 4 kids experiencing bullying, we must continue to invest in programs that can help our youth overcome the challenges that can hold them back. These investments set the trajectory for an entire life. So choosing to interact and intervene with children and youth early on through after-school programs, leadership programs, and through arts makes far greater sense than providing life-changing supports in their adult lives. Our next area of focus is poverty to possibility. Now, poverty is a complex problem and is linked to several other social issues. It's unacceptable that 12% of households are food insecure. That means that for every 10 kids or 10 seniors, approximately 1 won't know where their next meal will come from. Because of its complexity, poverty solutions require a balanced approach. When people are hungry, it's difficult to maintain employment, look for work. It impacts cognitive function and their ability to conduct long-term planning. And lack of food prevents children from being able to focus and learn in school. Food is often one of those items that households will sacrifice when it comes to paying for heat, hydro, and rent. Housing is another basic human right. And for those who are homeless, your donations have helped them find housing and put a roof over their heads. With your help, we will continue to fight poverty to end its detrimental impact on society. Moving into the third and final area of focus, we can see that mental illness is on the rise. With 1 in 5 people struggling, mental illness prevents people from working, parenting, learning, and creates a divide. We expect this number to increase. Add to this feelings of isolation among our senior population, and we must continue to offer programs that help people feel a sense of belonging, a sense of relief, and the ability to better handle life's challenges. Your United Way has a rich history with labor, community partners, government, the private sector, and volunteers. We convene these stakeholders to strengthen our collective impact and inspire action. I want to take a minute to highlight some really exciting initiatives that your donations made possible. And you may not be familiar with some of these. We have 211, a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week lifeline and chat feature that has provided support this past year to more than 7,200 local residences facing challenges. It's matching them up with non-emergency social programs that are offering support. We have our Connect Ed workshops, which are offered to agencies and charities to help them navigate various issues and build skill and help them optimize efficiencies and impact. We also have our Social Innovation Labs, one of our newest initiatives, engaging leaders and stakeholders through a design thinking process, helping nonprofits explore transformational ideas and building resiliency. Our Period Promise is an initiative advocating for barrier-free access for menstrual hygiene products, and this year resulted in the community raising more than 130,000 products for those in need. We also have our Financial Empowerment and Problem-Solving Initiative. And this is a partnership that helps with barriers for those who are not able to file their tax returns. And through this partnership, which you'll hear a little bit more about later from our panelist, Kim Martin, we were able to put more than $1 million in refunds this past year into the hands of our most vulnerable, which is a game changer for many. In addition to strategic initiatives and partnerships, we've been able to secure almost $30,000 worth of youth experiences, such as trips to the Royal Ontario Museum, participation at sporting events and cultural experiences. We've had almost $17,000 of seasonal items donated to those in need, such as winter clothing and holiday gifts. And through Convening Community, close to $180,000 of household essentials were provided to low-income households, including diapers, shoes, and laptops. There are many more featured items in the impact report, which you'll receive following this presentation. This is a snapshot of our last year, and I just want to say your impact has been significant and has changed lives. So now I'm going to introduce Mike Mikulak. Mike is our Vice President of Community Impact, and he's going to lead a panel discussion where we're going to hear from the front line. And you're going to hear about the impact that you've made and some stories around who you've helped. Mike, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thanks, Brad. Hello, welcome everybody. I'm so happy to welcome our 4 panelists who are with us to take a bit of a deeper dive into some of the local community issues and how your investments help individuals get the support they need. So we're going to host a bit of a Q&A with this, and each person will be introduced one by one. So Kim Martin is the Executive Director of the Social Planning and Research Council of Hamilton. Alma Arguela is the Executive Director of the Sexual Assault and Violence Intervention Services of Halton. Andrea Butters is the Manager of Resource Development at Wesley Urban Ministries. And John Chisholm is a partner and CEO at SB Partners and the United Way Halton and Hamilton Campaign Chair for 2020-2021. So before we start, so I just wanted to give you a warning that some of our panelists are going to be talking about some sensitive issues. So just a little bit of a forewarning. Some of the stories are coming right from the front lines and might be a little bit hard to hear. Our first panelist is Kim Martin. She is the Executive Director of the Social Planning and Research Council of Hamilton. Kim has held several leadership positions in the behavioral health sector with extensive experience working in the addictions field. So prior to joining the SPRC, she was self-employed as a management consultant and an organizational trainer. Kim holds an undergraduate degree in social work and political science from McMaster University and an MBA from Leicester University. Welcome, Kim. So SPRC is a bit of a unique partner, and we fund them to do social planning work primarily, in addition to several key programs. Their research is crucial to helping us understand local issues in a very granular way. The reports they produce, the data they gather and analyze help us get a more accurate snapshot of what poverty looks like locally. And this in turn really helps guide us to make better investment decisions and really understand where we need to focus our attention. Today, we're excited to take a bit of a deeper dive into a specific program that we're collaborating on called the Financial Empowerment and Problem Solving Program, an OTF-funded program that we've been working on together for the last couple of years. United Way is, generally known as a funder and for our workplace campaigns, but we also take a leadership role in some of these collaborative projects, and like FEPS in Hamilton and Halton recently. This has helped us to bring over $1.5 million in grants over the past 3 years from the Ontario Trillium Foundation, and as Brad mentioned, has helped individuals file taxes and gain financial literacy skills and improve economic well-being. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you.
So could you tell us a little bit more about the FEPS program and how it came together, what it is, who it serves?
Absolutely, thanks. So the Financial Empowerment Problem Solving Program, or as we call FEPS, in Hamilton it's also known as Hamilton Tax Help, which is a little bit easier to navigate, verbally. We've been aware and we have studied poverty for a number of years, and certainly one of the things that we're really aware is that poverty reduction strategies have been effective in terms of helping to reduce poverty. They haven't reduced poverty, obviously, to the extent that it's no longer an issue, but certainly, government initiatives, both on a federal and provincial level, have helped in that process. So looking at that, we started looking with some of our partners at what does it mean in terms of individuals and families that are economically vulnerable, and are they actually accessing the benefits that they're entitled to? And in looking at that process, we found that actually there were a number of people and families and individuals that were economically marginalized and vulnerable that were not accessing those programs. We saw, for example, that in 2014, there were actually over 7,300 eligible families that didn't file for the Canada Child Benefit. And that's significant because those are missed dollars in people's pockets that can go towards all of their needs. So this represented approximately 13,000 children in Hamilton alone. And the dollar amount for that was over $42 million. So imagine $42 million that's not being accessed by the people who need it the most. So that's pretty significant. We partnered with the United Way, and we partnered with the City of Hamilton, and we partnered with the Hamilton Roundtable for Poverty Reduction. And together we applied for training, as you mentioned, for funding through the Ontario Trillium Foundation, and we were successful. So we were successful to start this program. I also want to add that the original model for the program was launched by Toronto's West Neighbourhood House in 2003. So this isn't a program that we have created and initiated, but we've certainly used that model that was already existing and running in more than half a dozen sites across the province to start to use that as a starting point. So the objective of the program really is to increase the financial independence and also to look at tax filing and increase tax filing amongst people that are making in a low income category, and with the benefit of being able to provide those benefits to them through the tax filing. In addition to that, we also do workshops, financial workshops, and those workshops have everything to do with tax filing as well as financial literacy. One key area that I want to mention in terms of importance, particularly now as we are still currently experiencing this pandemic, is education on scams and frauds. And I'm sure we've heard about a number of things in the media about people getting phone calls and being asked for personal information in terms of bank accounts and saying that money's on the way. And so there's a number of frauds and scams that are out there, and that's also been part of the empowerment part of our project. I think many people know us in terms of our tax filing, which really is key. And I also want to emphasize the empowerment part of the project, which is really helping people to better understand the tax process, to better understand the entitlements that they are supposed to get, and also to better protect themselves against things like frauds and scams. So we have that component of the program in terms of some of the direct service that we provide to individuals. And then we have the second part of the program that was really important is the community capacity building. And so, the success of any program is going to be how well it can be grown and developed within the community. And as part of that process, we've worked with organizations to help them educate their staff in terms of some of these benefits around tax filing, and also to ensure that they're asking those questions when they're meeting with their clients in other areas. Through that community capacity, it's also allowed us to be able to access referrals and to be a resource to other community groups when they need assistance and when their clients need assistance. And without those referral patterns, we wouldn't be able to achieve, I think, nearly half of what we have been able to in the last couple of years. The third component I'll just mention is in terms of policy and advocacy, and really advocating for systemic changes. So through the experience of the people whom we serve, we're actually able to identify with them what are some of the, what are these systemic barriers that exist, and how can we advocate with different levels of government to eliminate those barriers. And one example of that would be some of the work that we have done with other community partners and national partners at a provincial and national level, is to advocate with the federal government to ensure that people don't get cut off from their tax benefits during the pandemic if they're not able to file their taxes. Because if people typically don't file their taxes, then those benefits are actually cut off after a period of maybe a couple of months. So ensuring that people don't find themselves in more precarious situations, particularly as they're experiencing, as we all are, a global pandemic, is really important and a key part of the work that we do. So one of the things that I would just add is that in terms of for people that have been making donations to United Way, and I want them to know that those donations, they go to benefit individuals, not only in terms of the programs, like what I've described, the individual work, but also in terms of some of that systems change work that needs to happen. So we couldn't do it without the support of agencies like the United Way and our partners that help us to be able to address some of those issues.
Yeah, those are really good points. Thank you for sort of giving us that sort of big picture view. I think a lot of people assume when you build a program and you're entitled to refunds, it's I think surprising to a lot of people that these aren't just picked up, and they don't realize the barriers and some of the when you are living in poverty, how even little things can be magnified because of that sort of limited bandwidth that you might have if you're jumping from job to job and finding time to do that and navigate complex systems. So I really appreciate that kind of overview. I'm wondering if you could just take a few minutes and give us maybe some specifics around, how this has impacted lives, individual lives, and tell us a story about someone a community member who has accessed the service, because I know some of the stories are really incredible.
Yeah. I'm amazed when I hear about the experiences that people have had and the testimonials that they have provided. So I'm happy to do that. I wanted to start just by saying that I wanted to acknowledge that the experiences that I will share today belong to the individuals themselves, and it's only with their permission that I'm sharing this with you today. So I just want to offer my thanks to them for sharing their stories with me so that I can share them with you. And I also just want to mention that any names that I do use will have been changed in that process. So one of the people I wanted to tell you about was someone, his name is Edward, not his real name, but Edward was diagnosed with a chronic lung disease, and he was given a life expectancy of 3 to 5 years. And that was his reality. He had been diagnosed with this condition. He wasn't expected to live all that long. And at the age of 65, he was still working. He was still working because he owed money to the CRA, and the CRA, Canadian Revenue Agency, was actually clawing back money from his Canada pension plan in order to pay that debt. So that was the reason he was working, was that so that he could pay that off and of course still have money to meet his basic needs. But what happened then with Robert was he then became ill. And so the symptoms of his disease progressed as he would expect them to happen. But with that, it meant that he could no longer work. And he had a very physical job that he had. So he had to stop working. And in doing that, he lost his income. And when he came to Hamilton Tax Help, he'd actually been accessing food banks as a way to secure food for himself and also be able to pay his rent. And he was collecting OAS because he'd been working, but he didn't receive the guaranteed income supplement with his old age security because he had been working. So again, when we start looking at what are some of these systemic barriers in place, that was certainly one of them for him. So our staff worked with him to solve three key issues at the time. So the first one was that he was obviously paying this $350 to CRA every month that he could not afford. So through advocacy work with the CRA and relationships and working with him, we were able to get that eliminated based on his conditions. The second thing that we helped him with was that we helped him to apply for his guaranteed income supplement, and he's now receiving that now. And the third thing was that we assisted him in filling out and getting paperwork completed so that he could apply for housing out of Hamilton, where his niece and nephew lived and where he was going to be spending the rest of his time. So those were sort of three very concrete ways that we were able to assess and be part of that process. And certainly the advocacy is important. And like I said, a lot of people think about have heard of us in terms of the tax filing, and the tax filing is crucial to this process. But the empowerment piece is even more important. So how do we connect people to community resources and support them in the process?
That's an incredible story. Thank you so much for sharing that, and to the person for sharing that as well. We're really excited to actually be spreading this program now into Halton in collaboration with yourselves as well, and to really enhance some of those capacity building and advocacy pieces, and learning really from what you guys have done and from this partnership, and sort of in order to be able to move forward. So thank you very much. Next, we have Alma Arguello, and so she's she's the Executive Director of the Sexual Assault and Violence Intervention Services, or also known as SAVIS of Halton. She graduated from the University of Windsor with honors from an international relations, and went to obtain a master's at York University in international development. Her passion and her dedication to helping and advocating for immigrants, vulnerable women, and youth has been really important to her throughout her career. Alma has over 13 years in advocacy work, and as the ED at SAVIS since 2016, she has focused her advocacy against sexual assault and sexual abuse. SAVIS provides free, confidential, and non-judgmental 24-hour service to all survivors of violence, including women, men, and members of the transgender community. SAVIS advocates against violence in the community at large and promotes prevention through community education. With help of donors, United Way Halton Hamilton is able to support SAVIS's relationship, skill, and violence prevention programs, Senior Sharing Circle, and the North Halton Counselor Program. Welcome. So first, sexual abuse and violence and human trafficking is often unseen and underreported. So I'm wondering, Alma, if you could tell us and share how these situations perpetuate and what SAVIS does to help clients get out of violent and abusive situations.
Thank you so much. And thank you for everybody. And thank you for United Way Halton Hamilton. So that's a big loaded question all at once. So I'll try to answer to the best of my ability. So we're living at a time of social change and social change related to sexual violence. So you had movements such as Me Too, Time's Up, and right now we have a huge movement, which is Black Lives Matter. The movement those movements have forever changed the narrative and changed the needs to what happens in terms of gender equity, racial equity for BIPOC. And those conversations no longer are side conversations, but potential action items, but items that hit reality of what's happening now. So what does that mean? It means that this movement are giving us the platform to voice what survivors, advocates have been saying for years. That sexual violence is widespread in our own Halton community and across society in general. Conversations about violence in all forms, and sexual harassment, sexual exploitation, human trafficking, sexual assault, has been growing exponentially in the recent years. As the only community-based sexual assault center in Halton region, we are overwhelmingly in demand, and we're seeing across our programs areas is clear evidence of this culture shift. It is encouraging in a way that more people who have experienced sexual violence are coming forward, but the movement has also revealed how much change still needs to happen. These societal issues, and only working together, we can make a difference. The stats have not changed at all. In fact, when it comes to sexual assault and sexual exploitation, that's the only crime that has not decreased, in fact, has increased. So we know for a fact that 1 in 3 girls, at least, and 1 in 6 boys will be affected of sexual violence before the age of 18. Many more experiences sexual assault, and they will also experience more experience of sexual assault as they grow up until they reach adulthood. These are not individuals living in isolation. These are people living and working in our own community. We all know some who have been impacted, whether we realize it or not. Sexual violence does not discriminate. It transcends all demographic. It cares not about gender, sexuality, ethnicity, cultural, socioeconomic status. Since COVID-19, we have seen not just the crack of the system, but craters of systemic and poorly funded program sector in the past 10 years. A system that has operated from gender inequities, and we are now facing with currently at Savas, we're in, especially within the COVA area, we are experiencing exiting survivors away from traffickers without external institutional support at times. So what does that mean? It means that at that certain times we're having a hard time exiting survivors and providing them with the proper supports that they need, whether it's housing, whether it's being able to report to police, whether it's able to be for them to have an abortion and exercise their own reproductive right, whether it is the ability for them to go get a sexual assault kit done in Halton region. Those are all systemic barriers that do not allow for that norm of social justice that a lot of us have such privilege to be enjoyed. So before COVID, the story that I'm going to share is very graphic, and I do want to put that out there. This story was, I think, one of the top 3 in my head. So just to give you an example into what that social inequality has looked like prior to and what it is now, and how a story like this could be amplified during COVID. Savas is the only agency that supports an exiting program for human traffic survivors in Halton region. We work collaborate across the province, but mostly we work collaborate with Hamilton as well. So that ability of cross collaboration and cross-regional collaboration has helped us to have good communication, being able to support survivors. And also, we understand that the transient of this crime has no borders. So to have the flexibility has been easy. A while ago, we had a survivor who called us. And again, I do have permission to share her story. And this survivor ended up calling a crisis line. The survivor was someone who wanted to exit her situation. This survivor relayed the story this way. She said that her and her trafficker were having, she was going to be working for the weekend, and her trafficker, they were at a Tim Hortons, a Tim Hortons line, and her and her trafficker, they got to the front of the line, and she ordered what she wanted, he ordered what he wanted, and the guy said to her, "Okay, pay." And she said to him, "I'm not paying, you're paying, you have all my money." The guy apparently just gave her a look. He ended up paying. They went back to the hotel. I'm not gonna say which hotel, nor am I gonna share what city. They went back to the hotel, and in the hotel, the survivor shared with us, I'm gonna call her Jennifer. Jennifer ended up sharing with us that throughout the whole ride there to the hotel, he was very upset at her. When they got to the hotel, he said to her, "I cannot believe you just embarrassed me. And this is the last time you will ever embarrass me." So let me give you a little bit of background. This specific survivor is not anybody that had ever experienced CAS. She was a person that never experienced a form of poverty. She said to her that she said to us, "I've always been a good white girl." And she said to us that she also got accepted at a very good university and she had good parents. So this is someone that experienced what most people will say not a traditional traffic person, whatever that person may look like, because sexual exploitation has not necessarily a specific picture. Neither does a trafficker. So this individual, after she left her parents and after the trafficker was able to manipulate her to leave her education behind because he was going to provide her a home, a loving home, and they were going to be working together. He showed a token of his appreciation and love and buy her this cute little Chihuahua dog. So fast forward to that horrible night. He said to her, "I cannot believe you just embarrassed me." So she said, "Well, you have all my money. What do you want? I don't have any money and I'm here to work. So you take all my money away from me." So he threw at her a lighter and he said to her, "You have a choice," as he picked up the dog and put the dog in the hotel microwave. He said to her, "You either burn the side of your legs or I'm pressing star." Because that's the way they manipulate and because that's the way they punish, she had a second-degree burn in the thighs of her legs when we first met her. That's when she thought she needed help. That's when she reached out to us. We were able to not only provide her in the support to go to medical support, we were able to provide her to go to a crisis unit that we have. She did not want to go to a hotel because she had been aggressively sexually assaulted by many Johns and sold at a hotel room. So that was very triggering for her. To be able to be in an apartment where she could sleep, pick the color of her linens, pick what she wants to eat, it's empowering. That is the work in terms of survivorship. That was my story when I thought that is the worst case scenario that I experienced until COVID-19 hit. And the lack of, it really showed what more work we need to do as a community and how we could rally together. And we have rallied together.
Wow, that's an incredible story. And I thank you for sharing that. And thank you for getting the permission to share that. I think it really highlights the complexity of some of these issues and how kind of regional collaboration and really working with all these different partners can support these individuals as they come out of these almost unimaginable circumstances in order to be able to move on. Thank you so much for sharing that. Next, I'm going to introduce Andrea Butters. She's from Wesley Urban Ministries. So Andrea is the manager of resource development for Wesley, and that's a nonprofit in Hamilton and Halton region. Andrea has worked in communication and fundraising in the nonprofit sector for about 2 decades and is passionate about inclusion and community engagement. She's a Trent University graduate with certificates from Mohawk College, Queen's, and Princeton University. So Wesley offers a number of crucial services that help marginalized and vulnerable people. And with the help of donors, we're able to support their youth programming, early years mobile, multicultural and seniors outreach programming, Wesley Youth Housing, and the Day Center, and additionally some additional funds through the COVID emergency as well. So this past year, Wesley was actually notified that their day center lease was not going to be renewed, and it wasn't certain where a new location could be found for a number of different reasons. United Way Halton and Hamilton, City of Hamilton, and the Hamilton Community Foundation were able to offer support, and due to the generosity of donors, so that basically community members wouldn't fall through the cracks, and we're able to extend some additional funds so that they can find a new lease. I'm wondering, Andrea, can you share more about how the Day Center supports community members and what actually the closure would have meant to them, especially now that COVID has hit and the value of a center like that has really come to light?
Thanks, Mike. I'm happy to speak about that. I think I first want to say thank you to Kim and Alma for their words, and particularly for the stories that they shared of the people who've been supported in the community. So thank you. So Mike, the question about the Day Center closure, I think in one word, I would say devastating. The Day Center is a safe place in Hamilton for people experiencing homelessness. We provide basic needs like access to washrooms, laundry facilities, food, places where people can get phone messages and mail delivered, which is essential for staying in touch with family or medical appointments. As well as there's access to healthcare where you don't have to have any ID, housing help, and harm reduction. So I can't believe in less than a year, we've gone from it almost closing to now being considered an essential service during the pandemic. And we've been open every day during the pandemic. So I really want to acknowledge the very dedicated staff who work frontline in that program. So last year, the community came together to rally for the day center to open, and that includes groups like United Way that stepped up with additional funding, and we're so grateful for that support. It included local doctors and nurses that work frontline with people who are homeless, experiencing mental health and addictions, and said that this program is a safety net for the most vulnerable in our program, in our community. And most importantly, it included people with lived experiences who spoke about how critical the program was. And so just briefly, I want to tell you, and again, these are not their names, and these stories have been, are shared with permission. But an example would be Carol, who in her 20s thought that her life was hopeless. And she talks about how everything she did was for drugs and how literally coming to the day center saved her life because she could come to the center and be using drugs and not be kicked out. And when I last connected with her, she was 10 months clean, which is remarkable. She was living in an apartment and she was starting to work. And like many people who experience homelessness in our community, Carol experienced a childhood trauma. And drugs were a way to deal with the pain. And for other people in our community, it's a loss as an adult that leads to homelessness. So Stephen, he was a professional and he had a major bike accident and suffered a brain injury. And he lost his job and his condo and his relationship and was living in a car the first time we met him. And we were able to help him rebuild his life. And so I just hear over and over again from people like Carol and Stephen, they tell people, go to Wesley Day Center, they won't judge you, they'll help you. And so it was just so important during those rallies that people with lived experiences of homelessness were saying this program must continue.
Yeah, and it was really truly an incredible kind of community rally that happened around this. And I think, you know, there's so much stigma associated with homelessness. And, you know, I think Steve's story in particular it was always really moving to me to think about someone who, as you said, was a professional, right? And who by no fault of his own through an accident, you know, and a head injury, all of a sudden lost his ability to generate income, and really his life fell apart and very, very quickly. So it's incredible to hear the way, you know, the day center can really wrap around an individual and ensure that they can bounce back up and get back on their feet. And I know, you know, a lot of people think right now, you know, we're in month 3 of this COVID pandemic. A lot of us are working from home, right? We're all used to these Zoom meetings now. But you know, the day centers had to stay open, and Wesley offers broad supports, including food, housing, employment, and youth programming. And the impact of the pandemic has fallen really heavily on the most vulnerable. What do you expect the next year to look like for Wesley and your clients?
To be honest, I think it's going to be an incredibly difficult year for the most vulnerable. There's going to be a lot of competing needs in our community, and I think funding is going to be a challenge. We're working on the front line of social determinants of health. So those are the determinants that have a major impact on your health incomes. This includes education, housing, social exclusion, race, gender identity, just to name a few. And the broad supports that Wesley and other United Way funded organizations offer are critical for employment, for parenting support, children and youth programs. And I would say that COVID-19 and the anti-Black racism conversation has highlighted the need, not just during pandemic, not just when it's a top news story, that everyone in the community needs to have access and opportunities. And there is a lot of concern about what the upcoming year will have ahead of us. And I think the people you chose for the panel today were so fitting. So we're going to be relying on the research from the Social Research and Planning Council on how the pandemic has impacted people, We know there's concern around Canada and around the world about how domestic violence has been underreported. And I know we're all concerned about how the last few months has affected the health and well-being of all people, but particularly children and youth. So to be honest, is it going to be an easy year ahead? Probably not. We're all concerned about the prolonged isolation and the long-lasting economic insecurity, and that COVID-19 could be a tipping point to put more people at risk. But there's also so much opportunity to look at what kind of community we want to build together and what it will take to be more inclusive and equitable. And so I'm glad to be part of this conversation today, and that I think all of us together will be part of that work in the upcoming year.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think it's really sort of, I think all the panelists today have spoken to some of the challenges, and we're here celebrating what our donors have been able to sort of accomplish through the year by investing in these crucial services. And I think as we look forward, I think hearing that message that you ended with, it's going to be a hard year, and we all need to rally around what it means to sustain that social safety net during, a historic event of this magnitude. So thank you very much for sharing that story with us today. Next, I'm going to introduce John Chisholm, and he's the campaign cabinet chair. So he is a partner at SB Partners, he's the CEO and a partner at SB Partners and Burlington's award-winning full-service accounting firm. John is a strong advocate of employee enrichment and community support. John has a gift for giving back and serving community. He's proven to be a community leader and influencer, and has been a member of the United Way campaign for many, many years. As the 2020-2021 campaign cabinet chair, John looks forward to serving and supporting the goals of the United Way Halton Hamilton during what will probably be one of the most difficult years yet. So thank you for taking that challenge on, John. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you joined the United Way movement?
Sure. Thank you, Mike. Thanks for having me. And I do want to thank Kim, Alma, and Andrea. I think their stories and the impact that they make in the community is story enough as to why donors should support United Way. We started as a firm over 15 years ago running a workplace campaign. And that was at the advice of then Mayor Rob McIsaac. Spoke with Rob about how to become more engaged and involved in the community. And Rob felt that we should really investigate the United Way and run a workplace program, because it was a way to build team engagement, but to gain a greater understanding of what the needs are in the community and how we could actually support that. So that's how we started as a firm supporting it, and I supported it as a donor. And we did achieve those results. We got great team engagement. It's a positive. Everybody looks forward to that campaign every year. Rob came out and helped us launch that first campaign, and that enthusiasm grows every year. As a donor, I appreciate the rigor by which the United Way determines how it can make an impact in the lives in the community, and provides that stability of funding to the agencies and programs that they run that can make the impact. And I think, again, it's evidenced by what Kim, Alma, and Andrea shared with us today. So as a donor and then becoming a volunteer, I did volunteer on the 2009, 10, and 11 campaign. And again, built a lot of great relationships and network as a result of that. And I came back to the campaign in 2018 and in 19, and you're right, Brad and I had a coffee on February 27th at his invitation to ask me to consider chairing the campaign this year. And we were much closer than 6 feet. We sat at a booth at a local cafe. And you look back at that as a whole different era. And so I again accepted that opportunity because I did feel it. And as you know, obviously with the pandemic, it makes this a bigger challenge, but I think it also just identifies how important the work of the United Way is and those funded agencies in our community.
That's great. Thank you so much for all those years of service. And I wonder if, to maybe end, we've been so focused on the crisis right now with the pandemic, right? And the generosity of the community has been absolutely incredible. Millions of dollars of funds have been raised, both from community and government contributions. And, we've been really busy trying to support the crisis and sort of help agencies get over the crisis right now. But as we look forward and, things are starting to open up. On my way in today, I saw people on patios, in restaurants, and it was like, I almost did a double take. As we move forward, how do you see United Way's role in building resilience and helping get past, from crisis to that resilience?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Mike. And when I explored that, resilience really means the ability to quickly recover from difficulties. And, you can look at fabrics as being resilient. I'm getting old, but you press your skin, it responds, right? It's that ability of resilience. But we know that much of our community doesn't have that capacity to rebound quickly to difficulties. So I could look at my own circumstance. I'm a fairly optimistic person. I have resources available to me. I have the benefit of an education. I have benefit of a great spouse. I have great family. And all of those things provide balance and foundation for me to respond to difficulties and challenges. But we're quite aware that a great number in our community do not have that. And that's where the United Way funded agencies provide that capacity of resilience. And you're right, I think we're lucky that we have some emergency funds that we can deploy to support the community during the crisis. But what's critically important is the stability of funding and that balance of our agencies to continue with that funding support to keep those programs active in such an important need. So the message to our donors and our community supporters, it's the time to lean in. This is not the time to step back, it's the time to lean in, and that challenge, you will be rewarded. I've recruited some friends and other business leaders to the cabinet this year. I promised them that this would be a rewarding experience. So I'm certain some are watching today, and I hope that they are experiencing that. So my challenge to you is lean in, Mike. So one quick test. I just want to share this challenge with you and everyone else that's participating. I want you to make a fist, and I want you to squeeze as hard as you can, okay? But now I really want to squeeze just a little bit harder for me. Just go a little bit further. And were you able to do that? That's the challenge. We all need to dig in because we know all of our agencies are doing that. They're leaning into those challenges and we need to support them.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think it's those are such important words right now that if we are fortunate enough to be able to be resilient, then I think we need to be able to support those that cannot, and the frontline staff who are doing that. So thank you so much. I'm going to bring back Brad up, and he's going to give a bit of a wrap up. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you to all of our panelists. We're so grateful for your tireless efforts and the expertise that you bring to solving these complex community problems. I think we can all agree that together in the past year, we've made great strides to tackle some of our most challenging social problems. With that being said, we know, just as John was mentioning, we all have to dig deeper and do more. This pandemic has uncovered cracks in the social service system. Like many of you, we've had to pivot and adapt to the new realities of the COVID-19 pandemic. And United Way's across the country been on the front lines raising vital dollars, supporting frontline workers and advocating for federal relief funds to lift the most vulnerable in our communities. I've said many times that although this global health crisis has resulted in distancing, it has at the same time united our communities. We're all facing barriers of uncertainty, yet one aspect that rings true is that we're all deeply connected. There are now more people on the edge of crisis, facing immense barriers such as poverty, mental illness and isolation. The stress on individuals, families, and seniors is high. And research shows that large-scale disasters are followed by increases in poverty, depression, substance abuse, a broad range of mental illness, behavioral disorders, and many more. People, families, and neighborhoods have been pushed to their limits, and the social sector is being stretched beyond its limits to serve them. As emergency needs and priorities continue to evolve, we know that recovery and rebuilding will take many months, more likely years. The reality is we know that local programs and agencies are worried about the future. We know that our fellow neighbors are worried. They're worried about their health, their incomes, and layoffs. They're worried about the economy. And although United Way responded locally to the crisis by investing emergency funds to help local programs adjust and pivot, we know more stability is needed. It's vital that the community understands these emergency funds are short-term and temporary. That's why your United Way is completely focused on rebuilding. And in order to rebuild, programs need stable, long-term funding. This year's annual fundraising campaign will be more critical than any year in the past. Our commitment to you is that we will continue to research and assess solutions that are based on evidence and innovation, and we will raise every dollar we can to support our community's most vulnerable. This is a community of kindness, a community of generosity. Thank you for being the hope that inspires others, for providing the stability that local programs need to help those who are struggling, and thank you for maintaining commitment to the 128 programs counting on you this next year. I'm both humbled and grateful for the sheer impact this community offers to those in need. So thank you for joining us today. I hope this past hour has been informative and beneficial, and I look forward to seeing you all again as soon as we possibly can. Bye for now.